All right, so thank you for coming to the Study Abroad Pre-Departure Orientation session number 1. I know it's scheduled from 3:30 to 5 o'clock today. This one is a slightly shorter one. I should get you out of here in about an hour, maybe 65 minutes-ish. The next one, just as a heads up, will be probably the full hour and a half, but this one's a little bit shorter in terms of the content. So welcome. We're all in the right place. So what I'm going to talk about today are kind of the big picture things and things that are here on campus. So I'll introduce myself. Hi, I'm Dominique. I study abroad in Japan. I'm study abroad coordinator. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about passports and visas, just in kind of a general terms, health insurance and why you need it. The academic processes here at NDSU and the course approval process, some financial planning things and how payments work and stuff like that. And then I'll have a little bit of conclusion at the end. But first of all, please get out something to either write or type on. We're having a surprise math test. I know, you didn't expect that to happen. Woo! So on your writing surface, please number your paper from 1 to 7. And then this is going to be the complete opposite of a normal math test. Instead of showing your work, I need you to do this math in your head. And then you can only write down your answers. So you cannot write down your work as you go. I'm going to give you 1 minute to do your math test. And then at the conclusion of 1 minute, I will show you the correct answers. And if you do not pass with 100%, you are not allowed to go abroad. No, that's not it at all. This is just for fun, but there will be a point to it. So when I switch to the next slide, there is going to be a key. The key is very important to tell you how to do your math problems, okay? So make sure you look at the key. That's my clue here. Okay, so 1 minute starting now. You have about 30 seconds left. About 15 seconds. 5 seconds. All right, time is up. Okay, so here are the answers. If you want to take a look, see how you did. Does anyone have any guesses as to why on earth I gave you a surprise math test and how this might relate to study abroad? It's a mystery. She's crazy. Right? Yeah. You just always need more time. Okay. So the reason why I have the surprise math test in there is I think it's a good example of kind of really experiencing how you can have certain symbols, certain things that you've learned through your entire life. This is the way that they work, but that they're seen differently or handled differently or mean something different in a different culture, and how challenging it can be to try to use your brain to translate from your system that you've learned from birth, you've been using forever, it just seems obvious, this is what this means, this is how it works, and translating it into a system that's not wrong, it's just something that's different and something that you're not used to. So as you're getting ready to go abroad, one of the things that I think is very exciting about it is it gives you this opportunity to start to look at these things that you've taken for granted up until this point and really give you insight into your assumptions that you have about our own culture as you're learning about a new culture somewhere else. And as you are there, the first couple of weeks especially, you're probably going to be very, very tired, and not just because of jet lag. It's also going to be a lot of learning, a lot of thinking, a lot of being exposed to things that you're trying to make sense of and try to understand in this new cultural context. So really, give yourself a break. Understand that you're probably going to need some extra sleep. You're going to need some quiet time at times, just to be able to process all of this new information and all of this new insight that you'll be getting while you're there. And then something that's really neat about going someplace for a longer period of time is that it really gives you this opportunity to not just have kind of these first impression understandings, but also to really dig deeper and deeper and deeper over the course of the time that you're there. Because when you first encounter something, you're probably going to have an idea of, oh, okay, I think I know what's going on. And then as you start to get more insight and more insight into the culture, you're going to start to realize, oh, okay, that was sort of right. But there's this whole extra aspect, this whole extra dimension that I've started to understand because I've been here, I've interacted with people, and I've really started to understand more the perspective that the people there have about it. So in short, you're going to experience different culture, different language, or even just different accents of English. Even in countries where people don't normally speak English, if they do know English, you're going to run into some interesting translation differences and slang and all that kind of stuff when you do talk to people in English. Or if there are other international students that happen to be there who are English speakers, you'll run into some of that stuff too, where they may have different slang or different perspectives that they're bringing in. New food. I personally, when I was in Japan, I wasn't a great fan of fish. So I did have to try a lot of different things to find things that I really liked. But the stuff that I loved, I just love. And I've actually had to learn how to cook it back here because I missed it so much. So even if there may be things there that aren't, your favoriteest food things, I really encourage you to get out there, try different food things, and it'll really surprise you. The things that you'll learn to love, or just on a first bite, you'll be like, wow, I had no idea that food could taste this amazing. You're gonna have new daily routines. One thing, just little things can really kind of change the ebb and flow of your day and kind of the feel of it. Even little things like if you normally shower during the morning, if you're in a culture where they bathe in the afternoon or in the evening before they go to bed, it just changes kind of the whole feel of the day. So you may have those types of things that you'll just end up adapting to over time. But again, give yourself some time and some kind of consideration for your own adaptation process going through that and getting used to it. You'll of course run into people who may dress differently and look differently, act differently. There may be some big differences in the terms of how people interact with each other, little things like how close people stand to each other, whether people look each other in the eye when they're talking. In some cultures that's actually really direct and kind of uncomfortable for people to make eye contact when they're talking. They may look kind of off away from each other as kind of a comfortable way of interacting. You may have differences in terms of the way that people of different genders relate to each other. Behaviors that you're used to may be flirting in another culture or vice versa. So just a lot of different types of interaction things that you're going to end up picking up and adapting to. It can be really helpful to read about some of that stuff before you go, but then while you're there also really keep an eye out on what the locals are doing and start to listen, ask questions and things like that to start to understand how they see it and kind of the way that they're thinking of it when they do certain types of interactions. Bargaining. Have either of you bargaining? You've bargained before. Have either of you guys bargained?
Like at a garage sale.
At a garage sale? Yeah. Yeah. You? Yeah.
Just like when I've been to Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
Things,
Yeah.
bargained to a jet skiing.
Yep.
Really, really expensive, but we're not doing that.
Yeah, personally, I snowboard in Japan. I wasn't a big bargainer. In Thailand, they do a lot of bargaining, and that's really the only place that I've ever bargained much. So I had my Lonely Planet paper book back when I went that said that people in Thailand actually find it a little insulting when you're at a market or something like that if you just pay full price, because you're basically like, I have so much money, I'm just going to throw it around. So I made the effort to attempt to bargain, to at least not be seen as an impolite American. My bargaining was terrible. It consisted of asking what the price was on something, and then the person would say, oh, it's this price. And then I would go, oh, and then like turn, like I was gonna walk away and not purchase the thing. And then very consistently the people would say, oh, but special deal just for you, and then give me a different price. And then I would go, oh, okay, bargaining complete. And then purchase the thing that I wanted at that point. That said, some people really get into bargaining and they're really good at it. It's almost an art form. So try it out if you have the opportunity in the place that you're in. You may enjoy it. You may find the sport of bargaining there. And then lastly, means of transportation. So I personally love trains. I wish that we could magically have a train or metro system here in Fargo, because I would give up my car in a heartbeat. Trains are just the best. Like, they're super reliable in other countries. They're really convenient. You don't have to worry about where to park them. You can just show up, get on, and you can read or talk with friends or whatever it is to kind of pass the time. And you often get to see more of the people that are there and see, if it's an above ground train, see what the local countryside is like, in a way that when you're driving you can't really focus on that sort of thing. So I hope that as you're enjoying these other forms of transportation, that you'll really give them a chance and kind of see the wonderful things about those experiences there too. And I will talk a little bit more about some of the transportation and getting used to the culture stuff in a future session. But any questions on just the quick intro? Okay. So in conclusion, you have a frame of reference that you have grown up with. It's going to be different from what people are used to. Be open, and then eventually you'll be able to kind of think about what your expectations were versus all of these new things that you've learned. And then coming back, you're really going to notice a lot of things about our culture here as well, because you will have a whole new frame of reference from that. So I'm excited for you. I'm excited to hear about all of the observations and new things that you learn being abroad. Okay, so jumping into a more serious topic, I'm going to talk about travel documents briefly. If you don't have a passport, you probably should apply for that ASAP. Generally 4 to 6 weeks processing time. I know they're running a little bit behind, so it actually might be more like 6 to 8 weeks right now. So I would recommend for anyone who doesn't have a passport, apply for one right away. The cost of applying for a passport is $135. It's broken into 2 different fees, one that goes to the State Department and one that goes to the Passport Processing Agency, where you actually submit your application. And then if you were to need to expedite a passport application, that's an additional $60. So it's always better to apply sooner and not have to pay that additional $60. When you apply for a passport, you need a certified birth certificate, which is something that has to be issued by the location where you were born, by the county or the state. And it can't be a photocopy of that. It has to be the original certified birth certificate. That birth certificate is sent back to you in a separate envelope from the passport, so you wouldn't lose it, but they would come back. And then you also need a passport photo. A passport photo is an official type of photo. They can take them at the NDSU card office. You can get them taken at places like Walgreens, Walmart, CVS, etc. The cost of them varies quite a bit. Usually they come in sets of 2, I would say for somewhere around $10. And you only need 1 passport photo for this, but if you do get a set of passport photos taken, hold on to the other photo because you may need it for something like a visa application or something like that down the line. You do also need a proof of identity. Often that's a driver's license or something like that, and then a photocopy. And there's more information on the State Department website, passports.state.gov. And I should also mention that our office here in the Memorial Union is a passport acceptance facility. So if you do need to apply for a passport, you can go on to the Study Abroad website, and there's a passport section that you can go in and set up an appointment to do that. There are also other passport acceptance facilities in Fargo-Moorhead, often at the post offices and things like that too, if one of those happens to be more convenient. And then a visa is kind of the next step in the process. A visa in this context is different from like a Visa credit card. A visa here is specifically a permission that a particular country's government has given to you to be in the country for a certain period of time for a certain purpose. So for example, to be in Spain for 6 months for the purpose of being a student. It's often a stamp or a sticker that's affixed in your passport. Some countries, though, have moved to online systems. So Australia, for example, has an online visa application process. But many of them, it's still some sort of stamp or sticker that goes in the passport. And then a visa is usually obtained from the host country's government before you leave the US. So it's kind of a pre-screening process that's done that gives you that permission to potentially enter the country. Some countries, though, do instead have residence permits. Germany is an example of one of those, where you may be able to enter the country on a tourist visa that's issued when you first arrive, and then have to go through some hoops once you're there to go through an application for a residence permit to extend the length of time that you would need to stay. To find out information on if you need a visa, there are a couple of different sources of information. The kind of prime, key, most important place is to look at the website of the embassy or consulate for your host country. So an embassy is the location that the country that you're going to has set in the US that is kind of their prime diplomatic headquarters. Most of the embassies are located in Washington, D.C. here. There are also consulates, which are smaller offices that are regional. So if you are a resident of Minnesota or North Dakota, most often if you're having to apply for a visa through a consulate, you have to apply in Chicago because they're usually assigned to oversee people that live in our area. That said, you do have to double check for any individual country to make sure that that's the case, because some countries it is broken up a little bit differently for that. For example, students going to Sweden work with the embassy that's in DC, even though there is a consulate that's closer, because the embassy in DC oversees all of the visa processes. To find the correct website, you can actually just search for something like Consulate of Spain, Chicago, and pull that up, and then double check what they consider to be their region, and look at the information that they have on there for a visa. Oftentimes, the host schools will send out information about the processes, tell you when they're going to be sending you documentation, help you through that process. Ask your study abroad advisor. I will be sending out some information to people within the next week or so on the visa processes that I know that people need to go through. So places like Spain, Italy, some of those different locations that people are going. So you can watch your email for that. And I'll just be pulling some information from the embassy or consulate website and giving you details on what the information is that you need to gather. And then the U.S. Department of State does have some information out there. I will say it's maybe the bottom option there, just because it's not a whole lot of detail for people going for student purposes. They often have a lot of information about tourism and not a lot about student visas. So if you are ever traveling in the future and just going for a vacation or something like that, definitely take a look at the U.S. Department of State, because it has a lot of good information for tourist travel, but it just might not get into enough detail to really address going for a longer period of time like you would be going. To apply for a visa, just to give you an idea of some of the types of things that may be asked for, there usually is some sort of visa application, which might be a PDF that you fill out or something that you handwrite that has information about who you are, where you're going, how long you're going to be there. They often will charge some sort of application fee to cover the cost of doing the processing and everything. They often will require a passport photo or photos, and there'll usually be a spot where you have to affix that. And do pay close attention with any of those if they have very specific requirements about how you're supposed to attach the photo, because sometimes they want it stapled, sometimes they want it taped with a little loop of tape. Sometimes they just really care about those tiny details in a way that seems extreme, but it's best to follow it as best you can to make sure everything goes smoothly. And then a really important thing is that if you are doing a paper application, they probably will need your physical passport in order to do the processing and to affix that stamp or that sticker into the passport. So often when you apply for a visa in that case, then you're mailing all of this stuff together or going in person to apply for this. and then giving them some sort of return envelope so that they can send back the passport that has the stamp or sticker in it so that you can have that in order to travel. Other things that come up in a visa application, often they need some sort of letter of acceptance from the host university where you're going to be studying. That's to say that that university is basically sponsoring you and saying that they're taking responsibility for you being well behaved and stuff like that, which really helps to kind of simplify the process. They may need some sort of proof of income, so that may be financial documentation from the financial aid office or from a copy of a bank statement or something from your parents or something like that. Some of the countries we do have information that's in a letter that our office issues. Spain is one of those, Italy is one of those, where we indicate that NDSU is taking financial responsibility, which kind of takes that annoying requirement off of your shoulders. But some of them just have kind of specific requirements, so we have to watch that pretty closely. Some do require a doctor's report or some sort of medical check-in. There are some locations even that require a chest x-ray to verify that you don't have tuberculosis. I know, for example, living in a dorm in South Korea, they require that for students. Proof of insurance is very common, and I'll talk about insurance in a little bit. But if you are going on a program that is an NDSU exchange program or a direct program, we often require that you purchase insurance through our office. Going on an ISEP program or an affiliate provider program, the insurance is often included in the cost or something that you pay for as part of going through the application process. And that insurance generally should meet whatever the requirements are for that, because there's kind of specific requirements that usually are out there for international travel kind of things. And then the big key that I kind of alluded to is that some visas do require that you apply in person, and there's sometimes a little bit of a tight window for doing that application in terms of when you're going to receive that letter of acceptance from the host university that you need to apply for and when you need to get the application in order to get it back in time for you to travel. So just be aware, especially if you're going someplace like Spain, that you would potentially be needing to go in person to do that application because you're not able to do it by mail. Okay, and then some really key things. If you are doing a paper application, so basically not going to someplace like Australia, then you do have to submit your passport. That means that you're without your passport for a period of time while they're doing that processing. It might be a couple of weeks. So don't plan any international travel to Winnipeg or vacations with your family or something like that during that time frame that they would be having your passport. In general, it can take 1 to 3 months to get your visa. That does partially include getting things together. In general, I would always recommend applying for your visa as soon as you can, knowing that we have some structural things like when the letter of acceptance is going to come that is going to really determine how early you can apply for that. Most of the time, you cannot apply more than 90 days in advance. Most of the time, if you were to apply before that, they just wouldn't even issue the visa because the visa would expire before you would be able to enter the country. So there's usually a 90-day window is all that you can, all the earlier that you could apply, even if you had everything. And then it is serious. I don't want to make anyone stress or lose sleep or anything like that, but I do have to emphasize that if you are required to have a visa for your country, you do have to get the visa. You can't just kind of ignore it and hope that no one will notice, because they definitely will. What would likely happen if you didn't have the proper documentation to get into your country is that you would get to the airport in Fargo or Minneapolis or wherever you're leaving from, and when you would go to check in for your flight, the person at the counter would take a look and double check and make sure that you have the right documentation to go to the country. And if you didn't, they would turn you away at that point. You wouldn't even get to get on the plane. And the reason for that is because if you get to that country and the country says that you can't enter, the country fines the airlines for having brought you there. So the airlines are very careful to make sure that everything is kind of good to go and ready for you to be arriving there and entering. And then one last thing is that if you do have any reason throughout this process to mail your passport, whether it's the application going there or whether it's the passport you've pre-purchased an envelope to have the passport mailed back to you, be sure to put a tracking number on it, because you do not want to lose your passport. It's just a huge headache to have to replace that, and then you would have to potentially go through the whole application process again. So some consulates have very specific, you have to do US Postal Service or something like that. Others, it's a little bit more open, so then you can kind of decide. The US Postal Service, a lot of their envelope options just have a tracking number on them. I will say that tracking numbers for USPS tend to be maybe not as useful as for UPS or FedEx, just because they'll often say it's been picked up, and then they will say it has arrived, and there is nothing in the middle for you to kind of keep an eye on what's going on with it, versus, if you've ever ordered something from something online, it's usually UPS or FedEx, where you can kind of see, oh, it was in Detroit, and now it's in Minneapolis, and now it's in St. Cloud, and now it's in Fargo. And so that can be kind of nice. And if you have that option, might be worth it, the cost to do a UPS or FedEx, just for your peace of mind. But again, some consulates do require that you do US Postal Service, and it is up to you to make that choice if you're given the option. So, any questions about that before I move on? And again, I'll be sending out more information in the next week or so here for some of the major places that people will be going. All right, so jumping into health insurance. So a big thing I wanted to talk about is, why do you need health insurance? And before I get into it too much, I want to tell you my sad story of woe. It wasn't me directly, but it was somebody that I knew when I studied abroad. So when I stayed abroad, I went for a full year. And honestly, I didn't pay attention to health insurance, right? Like, I was healthy, and this just wasn't a thing that was important to me. My parents cared, so they double-checked that our health insurance that we normally had would cover me while I was traveling abroad, and that was as much thought as ever went into it. I had a friend in Japan at Kansai Gaidai who, she was in much the same spot, where she had insurance through her home insurance, and just really it wasn't a big deal. No one was thinking about this. And then one day, maybe like 3 weeks or so after we'd gotten there, she was riding her bike, and she ran into a curb. And she wasn't even going very fast. She was going pretty slow, but she hit it at just the right angle that she fell over sideways and fell on her arm, and she broke it. And she really broke it. Like, she just shattered the bones in her arms. And so she ended up having to go to the emergency room, and they did an x-ray, and then they saw how broken it was, and then they did surgery, and then they put a bunch of pins in her arms. And she got really good care. The kind of challenging thing with this for her is that there's a different kind of perspective on healthcare in Japan than we have here, where here, if you had something like that happen, they would do the surgery, and then they would send you home as quickly as possible so that you could rest at home and recuperate with your family and friends all around you and stuff. But in Japan, they don't consider that to be a very good standard of care. They want you to stay in the hospital and to have them be able to watch very closely the healing and make sure that everything's going okay. So she was actually in the hospital for 2 weeks after that, before she was able to convince them to let her go back to her dorm room, because being in a hospital is no fun, and she didn't feel like she really needed to be there for so long for something that we normally wouldn't be. So everything seemed to be going okay, and then a couple weeks later she had to go back so that they could take a look and make sure that everything was healing okay. And they did another x-ray, and they realized that it wasn't healing okay. So she actually ended up coming back to the US so that they could re-break her arm and redo the surgery and all of this stuff, which luckily in the long term she was fine and taken care of, and her arm healed well. The problem, and the reason why I'm talking about it related to health insurance, is that her US health insurance company got the bill for all of this care that she'd had in Japan, and they said, whoa, 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 whoa. The policy that she was under said that she was covered for emergencies. And so technically, once the emergency room in Japan checked her into the hospital, even though her arm was broken at the time, that was no longer considered an emergency, and they wouldn't cover any of it. So she ended up with a huge medical bill in Japan. She wasn't there, and she didn't end up being able to go back. The school ended up being very nice and shipped all of her stuff back to her, but she basically had 3 weeks in Japan and then it was all over, and long-term probably hasn't really been able to go back because she has this outstanding medical bill there that she just is not going to be able to pay. So I tell this story as an example of how it can seem a lot of times like the coverage from a U.S. health insurance company may cover things, and they may say, oh, yeah, we'll cover it, you're taken care of. But U.S. health insurance companies will often really look for ways to get out of paying for things that might happen abroad. So it's really important to have a policy that is specific for international coverage rather than relying on a U.S.-based policy. As I mentioned, we do have a health insurance policy that our office has negotiated with CISI is the company. The particular policy that we have, and then the policies through ICEP and affiliate providers and things like that are going to have similar coverage. It includes international coverage with no deductible per injury or illness. It includes emergency medical evacuation. So if you had something that was happening where you needed to be returned to the US to get care or just taken to a different hospital to receive care that you might need, you would be covered for that. As an example, I used to work at Concordia, and we had a faculty member who was traveling with a group of students who ended up having a really minor health thing, but they happened to be in Jamaica, and at the time they only had latex gloves and she had a latex allergy. So the health insurance evacuated her back to Florida so that she could be treated someplace that had non-latex gloves. So it covers you for any type of that sort of thing. Also, if you were to be sick in the hospital for more than 4 days, the insurance would cover flying a parent or someone else you would designate to be with you there so that you wouldn't have to be in a hospital overseas by yourself. The very first year that we had the CISI policy, we had somebody who had been studying in the UK who went on a trip to Greece over spring break, had fallen and had broken her ankle. And so she was in a hospital in Greece. The health insurance, after she was there for about a day, determined that they didn't think that the first hospital that she was in was really giving the standard of care that they thought was appropriate. So then they paid to move her to a better hospital. They also paid to bring her mom in to be with her there while she was getting care. And then they also paid to have her mom go back with her to the UK once she was on crutches and had the cast and everything, to help her get adjusted back into her housing and to be able to finish the rest of her semester. So it's one of those things I hope no one needs, but it is a really nice option to have that there to make sure that you are not only physically taken care of, but emotionally are supported if anything were to happen. It also includes worldwide emergency assistance. So it's a phone number that you can call if there's something going on, where there are people who are experts in all of this sort of thing, where they can give you advice and assistance in addition to what our office can give. And then it includes coverage for things like if there was a natural disaster or a terrorist attack or political upheaval or any of those sorts of things. The CISI insurance back a few years ago now, 2009, when the Arab Spring stuff was happening in Egypt, the CISI insurance actually got students out of Cairo faster than the U.S. Embassy did, because they were really paying attention and making sure that people were safe when there were the protests and stuff that were happening. So it's not actually all that expensive. I talk it up like it's going to be super pricey, and it's really not. So if you are on an NDSU exchange program or a direct program, you are required to go in and purchase the coverage that you need by December 1st. You can do it earlier if you need it for visa purposes. It's $39.25 a month, and you just basically pick the start date that you want and the number of months of coverage. So if you're planning on traveling afterwards or going a little bit early, you can plan that out to include that in your coverage. If you are going on an ICEP program, we'll talk through it during the acceptance packet, but that'll be something that you'll purchase through ICEP as you're getting a little bit closer to the time that you go. 45 days in advance is usually when you have to purchase that. And then many of the affiliate programs have insurance that's included in the program costs for that. If you have any questions, though, please contact your study abroad advisor, and they can help just verify and determine what insurance you'll be covered under. Any questions? I know, this is like the most fun, right? Health insurance, sad stories. Okay, so going on, academics here. So at NDSU, soon we have registration that's going to be starting up. I will be sending out permits for people to register. Almost everyone is going to register for 12 credits of something called University 492. That is just a placeholder. It's just saying you are an NDSU student who happens to be studying abroad. That's what makes it so that you're able to take out financial aid and still access services and not have your loans go under repayment and all of those types of things. The reason for the 12 credits is that that is the minimum that you need to take in order to be a full-time student here. So to qualify for loans and for most scholarships and stuff like that. If you do happen to be a recipient of a North Dakota State scholarship that is for this particular semester requiring that you take 15 credits, you can register for 15 credits. But if you don't have a very specific reason to do that, like that, then only register for 12 credits. You can still take more credits abroad and have those transfer back, no problem. But if you register for the lower number of credits, then that's going to put less pressure on you to take more credits while you're abroad. So it's just giving you more options to register for the 12 credits instead of a higher number. Like I said, I will be issuing the permits, so you'll get an email that will have instructions on how to go through the registration process. There isn't a super hurry at this point to get that registration in, because it's not like, it's going to fill up. We know how many people are going and things like that. But when you do get the email and your registration window opens, just at some point, please go in and register so you don't run into any issues with forgetting and then potentially that causing issues with financial aid or things like that down the road. And then, like I said, even though you would register for 12 credits here, you can take more than that abroad. You can actually take up to as many as 20 credits and have those transfer back just like normal. That said, my recommendation is that if you have flexibility, to stick towards the lower end of that scale. Just because, going abroad, I really think that the opportunity to get out there, to do things, to meet people is really an important part of the learning experience for doing a study abroad program. You can always spend tons of time in the library here, and flying to a whole different country to spend tons and tons of time in their library is maybe not the best use of your time there. But if you do need to take more, to stay on track or to be fulfilling requirements that you have for graduation, you do have that flexibility to take more classes. And then do keep an eye on some programs may specify a minimum or maximum number of credits that you need to take, and that may be related to your visa. Some countries will say you have to take the equivalent of 15 credits in order to be eligible to be there as a student or something like that. So watch out for that as you're picking the number of classes that you sign up for. And then there is something here at NDSU called the Satisfactory Academic Progress Requirements, and that's related to financial aid. It's a federal guideline where you are required to complete roughly the same number of credits that you originally registered for in a semester. So that means that you would want to complete roughly the same amount of credits abroad as you register for of the University 492. So that's why it's helpful to register for kind of that minimum 12 credits, is because it's not putting pressure on you to complete a higher number of credits while you're abroad. And then also you will register for classes at your school abroad. So that'll be a different process from registering at NDSU. So you'll have two different sets of registration going on. Very often that registration process will happen either shortly before your program is going to start or as part of orientation on site. So it may be a while off before you finalize your course registration. But watch for instructions from your school and they'll let you know exactly how that process will work for you. Educational systems do vary. If you're going to Europe, for example, they often use ECTS for the way that they number the amount of credit that you receive. If you take a class in the ECTS system that is 6 credits, that should come back as 3 credits here at NDSU. If you register for a class there that's 7 credits, it should come back as 3.5 NDSU credits. It really is that specific. A lot of times people going to Australia, the classes usually come back as 4 NDSU credits. If you are unclear about the number of credits that you're going to receive because you don't know what that translation is, you can do the literal translation of it by multiplying out the number of hours. So literally, how many minutes are you in class? How many times does the class meet per week? How many weeks do you meet? Multiply that out, get a total number, divide it by 60 to get the number of hours, and then divide that by 12.5, and that's the number of credits that it's equivalent to. I know, it's a lot of math, but just figure out the number of hours of class divided by 12.5 hours, and it'll give you the number of credits. And there is more information on our website under the academics page. And then there are 2 forms here at NDSU that might be helpful. The first is the request to waive or substitute courses form. This is not required. If you just in general want to have credits come back that can count towards the total number of credits you need to graduate, you do not have to do this form. The credits will just transfer back when we receive the transcript. But this form is useful if you have courses that you would like to replace requirements for your major or your minor here. The form can be done before, during, or after when you study abroad. It's the same form that's used for substituting or waiving classes on campus. Most commonly for classes on campus, people do it during the class or after the class. But again, you can do it before, during, or after, specifically for study abroad. If you do it anytime up to when we receive the transcript from abroad, we ask you to turn that form into our office rather than into registration and records. And the reason for that is simply if you turn in the form and it's talking about classes that don't exist at NDSU, is really confusing for people over in registration and records because they look at it and go, what is this person talking about? But if you turn it into our office, we'll put it together with the transcript when it comes and a cover sheet, and we'll give it to registration records all as one packet, and it really speeds up the processing for you. And then after the transcript is received and sent over to registration records, you can still do this form. You can turn it into registration records directly at that point, anytime up until they have enough time to process it for graduation. And they'll have a copy of the transcript at that point, so then they would see, oh, okay, this is that class that she's talking about. This is where this is coming from. The form itself is something that's completed together with people in your department. So the academic departments have pretty much complete flexibility to make decisions about substituting things in. This can be as specific as this course is replacing this course. It could be more general in terms of this course, or this course. Any one of those can fulfill this elective requirement that we have in the major. It could be as simple as if this student completes this course, or this course, they would count as upper level credits for purposes of requirements for graduation, or something like that. There's a field area right here where they can just literally write information about that. And when they do it, if they do it before or during, they can specify, as long as the student passes, so they don't have to just say, if she gets a D, she's going to get it. They can say, if the student passes with a B or something like that, if they want to put more specifics on it, if they need that in order to be comfortable in signing off on the form. And then down at the bottom there's a couple of spots for signatures. There's your signature as a student, there's your advisor's signature, and then there's a signature from the department chair. So if you're wanting to look into course options, start with your advisor usually and see what they have to say, and then you'll usually connect up to the department chair. It can be helpful to find some courses that seem like they might be a good fit and bring that information with you. If you need help with getting a syllabus or something like that, please feel free to contact your study abroad advisor because they can help too with getting some of that. And yeah, they can approve pretty much anything that's related to requirements for your major or your minor. In general, I do recommend getting more approvals than you think you'll actually use. So they could write down any of these 16 courses will fulfill this elective requirement. And then if you get that early, you just know as long as I pass this course, this is what it's going to count for. So that can be really helpful in lowering your stress level and wondering what's going to happen after you get back. Sometimes when you talk to an advisor or talk to a department, they're like, oh yeah, it won't be a problem for us to sign off after you get back. if they're willing to, if you can talk them into it, I do recommend trying to get the signature now rather than waiting, just because you don't know for sure that that professor is still going to be here when you get back. I just got an email today that somebody from my committee is leaving NDSU for the program that I'm in. So, things do change here and there, and getting it kind of locked in and knowing that you don't have to revisit this down the road is really helpful for just your stress level. Again, if you have any courses that you don't care about how they transfer, you just need the total number of credits. You don't have to do a form, it'll just happen automatically when the transcript is received. And then remember that it does need your signatures and signatures from the department. And that signature is something that you'll work with your department to get that signature before you turn it into our office. And then again, remember to register abroad. And then the other scenario is that if you do have any Gen Ed requirements that are still out there that have not been fulfilled, if you're going abroad for a full semester, so you're registering for 12 credits of University 492, then you'd be in the second scenario there, the 6+ credits of University 492. Just the experience of studying abroad and completing that can fulfill both cultural diversity and global perspective. So you don't have to take those specific courses. Just doing a study abroad experience can do that. There is a form you have to fill out and turn in, but it's just who you are at the top, and then there's literally a checkbox for it. So it's super easy. If you have any other Gen Ed requirements, you do the Appeal General Education Requirements form. We have it on our website on the academics page, or One Stop has a copy of it. That is a little bit more in depth to do that. It is something that you would do after you return. So they do need to see that you have actually completed the course that you are trying to swap in. And you have to do an explanation of how the course that you took abroad taught you each of the learning outcomes that are associated with that particular general education requirement. And that's something where, again, we're very happy in our office to help with reading, essay drafts, and things like that, and giving you feedback if you would like help. That particular form, let's see, do I have it? Nope. That particular form is something, like I said, that you would do after you get back. There's a deadline each semester. It's November 15th and April 15th, I think, to hear about whether it's been approved during that semester. So you don't have to do it during any particular semester, but if you want to know if it has been approved during a particular semester, you have to turn it in by that November 15th or April 15th deadline in order to hear back. All right, and then one reminder, while you're gone, you'll also at some point have to register for coming back to NDSU. So that'll be your regular registration window, so watch for information on that. You'll just do it like normal through Campus Connection. Especially if you do have any specific classes that you really want to make sure that you get into, I do recommend trying to log into Campus Connection before you're going to be actually having to go in and do that, so maybe a week or two before, just to make sure that you don't have any problems with logging in. I'll talk a little bit more about the technology stuff next time, but do keep in mind, I think they're turning on the two-factor authentication stuff here soon for you guys. So you'll want to make sure to set up the two-factor authentication stuff before you travel, and that you'll have a way to access that, whether it's backup codes or an app on your phone that you can use by Wi-Fi or something like that in order to get into the campus connection system. But again, I'll talk more about that next time. And then if you do have any problems with the login process, it is the NDUS help desk that's going to be able to help. Unfortunately, in our office, we can't do much about the technical systems. So again, that's a good reason to try to log in early so that you can make sure to be able to troubleshoot that kind of stuff. And then do monitor your registration date and time. If there is a specific class that you need, you may end up needing to wake up in the middle of the night in order to do your registration because of the time difference. So account for that when you're planning doing that. And then before you return, you'll just want to make sure everything's in order. If you have to order your transcript, the transcripts do need to come to our office. I have the addresses up there for where those go to, but don't bother to write them down. Just remember there's a section on our website that says returning to NDSU. go to that page before you come back because it has some tips and tricks and reminders, and it also has these addresses on there. And that's a lot easier to pull that back up rather than trying to find a sheet of paper that has the addresses on there. One of the addresses is for like regular postal service mail, and then the other is for express mail, like FedEx, DHL, that sort of thing. And then processing timeline, just to give you a heads up, it usually takes about 1 to 2 months for the transcript to come after your program is over. We usually are able to process within a day or two, I'll promise under a week. And then registration records takes 1 to 2 months to do that processing. So it can take as much as 4 months for everything to get processed and to show up correctly on your transcript back here. If you are planning on graduating right after the program, because especially of the time that it takes for the transcript to come, that may impact the graduation date for you. It may end up pushing it back to the following semester. If that's the case, you don't have to take classes during that time frame. You just have to wait for everything to go through and process in order for the graduation to go through. And then just to give you an example of what the transcript will look like after, this is what a transcript looks like as kind of an example version. After everything is processed, you'll see the University 492, it'll say study abroad. It'll actually say, we changed it now, it's global practicum, it looks fancier. It'll say global practicum, it'll say attempted 0, earned 0, and then a P for pass. And the really important key thing I have to underscore is that please pass at least one class. You have to pass at least one class in order for us to give you that P for University 492. If you were to fail all of your classes, then we would have to give you an F for 12 credits of University 492, which is terrible and no one ever wants that to happen. But as long as you pass one class, you're good to go. We can give you a P. And then over here, you'll see the transfer credit section, and it'll just say transfer credits from name of the university it came from and the number of credits that you attempted and the number of credits that you earned. So if you register for 15 credits abroad, you only pass 12 of them, that's the only thing that you'll see there. You will not see the individual classes listed. There'll just be a slight difference between the attempted and earned credits. But either way, it does not affect your GPA back here. They're transfer credits, so whatever your GPA was before will be your GPA after. A couple of quick questions. Can my study abroad count as upper division credits? Yes, as long as the institution abroad indicates that they're upper division. We may need documentation if it's not clear the way their numbering system is or something, but oftentimes there's something on their website we can pull or something for that. No, study abroad does not affect your GPA because they're transfer credits. And then, do I need to earn certain grades abroad? Generally, no. Generally, as long as whatever they consider to be a pass is the pass, then registration records is going to go by that for their standard for indicating whether you have passed that class or not. One thing, though, is if you do have courses that you're planning on replacing courses here at NDSU, when you're getting approvals from your department, make sure that you double check that they don't have grade requirements. Especially if in your department they say all of your classes need to be of a B or higher or something like that. Those also apply for these classes too. So you need to make sure that you're aware of that. And I have a couple of examples on there that you can take a look at just to see what those are. Any questions? Okay. So jumping into financial planning, I just want to give you a brief overview of early costs during the program, and costs that are kind of out-of-pocket stuff. You can use financial aid to cover all of these. I apologize, I am definitely going over the hour-long mark, but I think this is useful. So first screen here, just to let you know, the boxes will be in the same spots on all three of these slides. So find the box that applies to your particular type of program, and you can just follow it through on the 3 slides to see. So early costs due to NDSU, you've probably already paid the admin fee. You may have health insurance that's due. You may have an affiliate provider deposit or something like that, but for the most part, it's just insurance between you and going that are due to NDSU specifically. Charges to your NDSU account for the term that you're gone. On a partner exchange program, students pay NDSU tuition and fees, and then the user fee, which for a semester program is generally $500. For under 90 days, it's $300, but for a semester, you're usually the $500. And that goes to support staff in our office. So me, essentially. ISEP exchange, there is the regular NDSU tuition and fees, and then there's a program fee that includes the room and board here, because with those programs, you're literally paying for a student that would be here in a future semester, and a student at the university that you're going to has paid for the equivalent benefits for you on the other side. And then again, the user fee. For direct programs, NDSU tuition is waived, so you only pay a small amount of student fees. A program cost that would be the tuition at that other institution, and it's whatever it literally comes through with the exchange rate. And then the user fee. And then affiliate and non-NDSU affiliated programs. Again, NDSU tuition is waived, and then small amount of student fees, and then the user fee. And then charges paid separately. So these are things that you can use financial aid to cover, but they are things that are not paid through NDSU. So these are things that you would pay at some point, depending on the way your program is set up, for as part of going. And there is information on all of the budgets of kind of where we think the ceiling of those costs are, but they're definitely things to plan for as you're getting ready to go. So partner exchange programs, there's room and board, spending money, passport, visa, flight, immunizations, books and supplies. ISEP exchange, you've already paid for the room and board, so it's just those other costs. ISEP and NDSU direct, similar to partner exchange, and affiliate and non-NDSU really varies. Some of those, the program fee includes room and board, some of them it doesn't. So if you have any questions, be sure to ask your study abroad advisor. And then as far as financing study abroad goes, there's a few ways that people do this. I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of information, but if you would like to get more details specific to your financial situation and you have questions, first you do have a study abroad advisor set up a budget for you, and then they can help you set up an appointment with a financial aid office to get into specifics for your situation. But to give you a brief overview, one option, and honestly the most common one for a lot of students, is private student loans. So those are non-federal loans that require a separate online application. Often those do require a cosigner with good credit. So I know that can be a challenge for people. And yeah, they might be through a bank or a credit union. Federal financial aid, this would be something that would require that you complete the FAFSA. Even if you haven't taken out aid before, one thing that's really good to know is that all students are eligible for an unsubsidized direct loan, which means you may need to pay the interest on it or something like that. But there are options for that. It's just depending on your financial situation that impacts the amount of what a direct loan you might be able to take out. So if you are curious about your options, it might be worth doing the FAFSA, even if you are not certain that you actually would want to do it. But at least then you would have the information to make the decision. If you are going to do the FAFSA, go to FAFSA.gov and do that. If you just Google doing the FAFSA, you may end up on somebody else's website that wants to charge you to do the FAFSA. If anyone tries to charge you to do the FAFSA, you are in the wrong spot. It is the free application, so there should be no charge for completing the FAFSA. Scholarships are another way. If you are already receiving scholarships for NDSU in general, or if you have, or if you are going to receive a study abroad specific scholarship, the way that works is together with any aid. When financial aid disperses, it just goes into your account at NDSU, pays on anything due to NDSU, and then you get a refund of everything that's over that. So you can still use regular scholarships here to cover study abroad costs generally. We did just have our study abroad scholarship deadline on October 1st, so that deadline has unfortunately passed. The information is with the committee right now, so we should be able to let people know by the end of the month if they are receiving a scholarship through our office. So definitely watch your email for that. And then there may be kind of limited other scholarships available on campus here, but you can take a look for information on the WMSTOP website, or we do have some information on other scholarships that are out there on our website too, if you want to see if there is anything out there still that you could apply for. And then, of course, savings, anything that you can earn between now and when you leave, over winter break or something like that. If you get an income tax refund during spring semester, you can use the funds from that. Any support from parents or family. If you have any holidays or birthdays that are coming up, oftentimes mentioning, hey, I'm going abroad. People like to support that, especially if you promise a postcard or some nice photos on Instagram or Facebook or something as a kind repayment to show your joy for what they have help. And in general, the less you take out in loans, the better. So anything that you can do to avoid taking out more loans is in the long term to your betterment. And then things to consider, we have switched so that in our budgets we have a whole column that's specific to those early costs, so especially things like your airline ticket to really help you try to plan for that. But those are kind of some of the planning pieces. If you're not certain about how you're going to pay for those things, be sure to talk with your study abroad advisor to get a budget so you can talk to the financial aid office, because they can help look at things like if you have some aid maybe that you haven't taken out for this semester or something like that, that you might be able to take out to have assistance with those early costs. And talking with them where they have your specific financials is going to be the best way to get kind of concrete answers on that. And then if you are going on an affiliate provider program or some direct programs, they may need you to complete a form that's called something like a verification of award or something like that, where they may have an earlier deadline usually for students to pay for their programs, but when they complete this form and verify that they're receiving financial aid or loans, they're going to be paying for that, then they're able to push that deadline back to match what the dates are that you would be receiving financial aid. If you're going on an exchange program or something like that, then you probably don't have to worry about this because you're paying NDSU tuition anyway. But if you are going on an affiliate provider program especially, then you may want to watch for that and make sure to fill that out so you don't start running into them expecting you to pay sooner than you're able to pay. A couple of links out here. Keep an eye on your total loan debt and what that would mean for payments after you graduate, just so you can kind of have an idea of the impact of things that you're planning on doing and what you're planning on spending. As a note, most of the alternative private loans can't be consolidated with federal aid, so you'd end up with two payments is what that's saying. That happened to me. It just is slightly more to pay monthly when you have two different payments as opposed to having it in one. But it's good to know so you're not surprised. Again, borrow only what you need. And then if you do need a cosigner for a private loan, it's often a parent or guardian, but it can be anyone. If there's a friend of the family or an aunt or uncle or someone like that who's willing to cosign, you could certainly ask them as well to see if they'd be willing to do that. And then odds and ends, if you are going to be leaving the country prior to when your financial aid is dispersed, so for spring semester, that's late January, then make sure to do the direct deposit form if you haven't ever received a refund back. That is in Campus Connection, or you can do a paper one if you want. And it will just set it up so that when your refund comes, it'll just go right into your bank account, so you can access that abroad already. If you don't do that and they have to send you a paper check, it might be as much as a month before the paper check is mailed, goes to your house, your parents have to deposit it, all of those types of details. But direct deposit shows up right away within a couple of days of when your aid goes in, and so it's super convenient for accessing funds abroad. If you want your parents or someone else to be able to talk to the financial aid office if anything goes awry while you're gone, make sure to do a FERPA release form. If you do have any kind of housing or a meal plan or a parking pass here on campus that you are not going to be needing, make sure to cancel those so that you don't end up being charged for them. And then if you do a private loan, make sure that you sign all the paperwork that you need to sign. The financial aid office does not find it annoying for you to contact them. Definitely contact them if you're uncertain if you have done all the paperwork that you need, and ask them because they can help double check that stuff. I'd say maybe once a year or so, there's somebody who goes abroad and is like, where's my money? It didn't come in. And it just turns out that they missed a signature somewhere on something. So it's better to double check than to be sorry and have a surprise down the road. So again, if you do want to look into the finances and talk to someone, you do first have to do a budget through our office. So contact your study abroad advisor, and then they'll set up the budget for you and then give you the information on setting up an appointment with the financial aid office so they can go into specifics. And you can use the Meet the Staff link on our website to do that. Okay, so conclusion. We're here. I started with a math test. I'm finishing with homework. Yeah, no, this is fun homework. So your homework for next time we meet is to write a letter to yourself. This is only for your purposes. We're not going to read it. You're going to put it in an envelope. It's going to be sealed. And once you get back, I'll give it back to you so you can read all about your excitement, your fears, your hopes, your dreams, everything that you are thinking about at this moment once you have the wisdom and experience of having been abroad. It's super fun. It's just a ton of fun to look back and kind of see how far you've come when you get back. So be sure, put your letter in an envelope, bring it to the next one, write your name on it, write letter to yourself, and then we'll hold on to it for you. And then lastly, the next pre-departure session is going to be in 2 weeks, so Tuesday, October 29th, in this same room, the Room of Nations, from 3:30 to 5 p.m. I'm going to talk about travel arrangements, money and communication, health and safety, all sorts of things. The communication includes using a cell phone abroad, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, thank you all for coming.